This segment of Delmarva Life is brought to you by Peninsula Regional Medical Center.
Well, since about the 1940s, women have been advised to get a Pap smear every year. The exam is used to screen for cervical cancers and HPV, but for the second time in 3 years, that notion is being challenged. Last month, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists revised that recommendation to once every 3 years in certain women. Pam Fleckenstein is the Women's Wellness and Gynecology Director at PRMC. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It seems like they're changing these guys. They have. I mean, this is the second time in 3 years. Now, we're not talking about your yearly visit to the OBGYN. We're talking about tests, right?
Tests. Yeah, you still need your yearly visit, but the Pap smear, which is the test, it's a screening test. It's not diagnostic. It's a screening test for cervical cancer, and we also include a test for human papillomavirus, HPV, as well.
Now, for women 30 to 65, they're saying there can be even a larger gap than the 3 years?
That's right. It's not just the American College of OBGYN, it's actually the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, and that's the group that sets the gold standard for just about all preventative care. For physicians in all disciplines. But specifically, the ACOG group has decided to adopt these recommendations that the U.S. Preventative Task Force Services has put into
place.
Yeah,
and you know, these guidelines pertain to certain women. It has to do with age and conditions and everything, and we have a graphic that kind of breaks that down. If you could kind of tell us what that is, starting with under 21, no PAP or HPV test.
That's right, and that shocks a lot of mothers, especially of daughters, that feel like that at least at 18 they should come in and have a gynecologic exam and a Pap smear. Pap smear is absolutely not necessary. There is almost 0 cases of cervical cancer under the age of 21. There are some abnormal Pap smears, but I think what they found is that they're doing more harm than good by over-treating this population for abnormal Pap smears. It can cause issues like infertility later in life when they decide to have children. So in this particular group of women, the pelvic exam and Pap smear should no longer be a barrier to care.
Oh, okay.
They should still come see us, and particularly if there are any GYN issues, but they do not need a Pap smear or a pelvic exam.
Okay, and those are women under 21.
Under 21.
Under 21. We move on to 21 to 29, Pap test once every 3 years. And that, I guess that's really, I don't know, I look at that as the childbearing years, really.
Yeah, that is, and that's probably the year when couples are more sexually active and more at risk for acquiring human papillomavirus, which is the virus that we see associated with cervical cancer. I won't go so far as to say it causes cancer, but it is the virus that is strongly associated with cervical cancer. When we see cervical cancer, HPV is always present. So in this particular group, because it's a very slow progressing virus, it's not necessary to do a Pap every single year. Every 3 years has been determined to be adequate through years and years of research since the 1940s.
All right, that was 21, 29. We talked about 30 to 65, Pap test once every 3 years, preferably Pap and HPV test together once every 5 years. Over 65, no testing at all, really.
Not really. There are a few exceptions. Women that would be immunocompromised, say they had a transplant, women with HIV infection. Also, there's some racial considerations too. In Caucasian women, cervical cancer peaks in the 50s, in Latino women, early 70s, Oriental women, late 70s, and women, African American women, there's no limit. They said they can be tested at any time. It's left to the clinician's discretion.
And that's key here. You really need to have that conversation with your doctor, your clinician, about whether or not you need these tests.
Right. They need to be able to assess whatever risk factors you may have.
All right, and then finally, there are exceptions no matter what age.
That's correct.
And people, women who've had a hysterectomy is one of them?
Women with a hysterectomy, if you don't have a cervix, you won't get cervical cancer. However, some obstetricians manage to take the uterus and leave the cervix, In that case, if you had a hysterectomy but you still have a cervix, you still need your Pap smear. But generally speaking, women with hysterectomies no longer need Pap smears unless the hysterectomy was done for uterine cancer, cervical cancer, some sort of pelvic cancer,
right.
and then you would need to continue surveillance.
Right. And one thing that I think a lot of people don't know is the Pap smear does not pick up on ovarian cancer.
No.
And that's, a lot of people were surprised to hear that.
Yeah. A lot of people assume that every time they have a pelvic exam, they get a Pap smear. I hear, you know, I went to the emergency room last night and they did a Pap smear. Well, probably not. You know, that's kind of a yearly screening test. Pap smears look at cervical cells and determine if there's any HPV viral effect present on the cells or if there's a cancer present. It generally does not pick up ovarian cancer cells, vaginal cancer cells occasionally, but that's very rare. Endometrial cells, meaning in the uterus, occasionally we see endometrial cells, but it only really screens for cervical cancer.
All right, Pam, good information. And again, just talk with your doctor to find out where you fall in those categories. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And if you would like more information about the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists recommendations or PRMC's Women's Wellness and Gynecology Center, go to our website, delmarvalife.com. Click on the Show tab. Well, still ahead on Delmarva Life, it's a party at the beach, but this party is for the kids. The Children's Beach House is celebrating 75 years of helping local kids, and this year you can help as well. We'll tell you how. Delmarva Life, life at its best here on Delmarva. But first, we talked Pap smears, now we're talking colonoscopies. Dr. Oz tells us why we don't want to skip this crucial exam.
Hi, I'm Dr. Oz. My recent cancer scare makes it clear, don't skip your colonoscopy. Everyone over 50 is considered at risk and must get this vital screening. If you have a parent or sibling with a history of colon cancer or polyps, get screened 10 years prior to when they found it. If you have other risk factors, like obesity, talk to your doctor about when to start.